You see, Russia isn't like the US or the UK, where if something goes awry, there's an outcry, right? There, Parliament or Congress would be on the neck of the leader, questioning every move. But Putin, he's in a different league. Sure, he might think twice if a reporter shoves a mic in front of him, but honestly, who's holding him accountable over there? From what I've seen, especially over the past century, Russia's not the sort where you'll find large-scale street protests. There have been some, of course, but man, their internal security, it's like a clamp, tight and suffocating. And so, I doubt we'd see big movements or any significant domestic unrest there anytime soon. Talking about the Ukrainians, they've been solid in their defense, right? But the Russian troops, well, they're no dummies. I chatted with this buddy of mine from Ukraine just the other day. He was talking about some captured Russian soldiers. It's a mix, really. Some of them look like they were picked up randomly, not really trained, but others, especially from their key units, now they're pretty darn well equipped. It's not all uniform with them. It's sort of uneven. Looking at those endless trench videos, man, it's like a maze. They seem kind of basic, and it's hard to think the soldiers can last long in those. I'm not even sure they've sorted out their whole logistics part. It seems pretty old school, still reliant on sheer numbers. But here's where they shine, and I've heard this from Ukrainians. Russians have a knack with drones, and their electronic warfare game, top-notch. They can jam signals, intercept communications. That's giving the Ukrainians a real headache, that's for sure.
General, we've seen reports from the Institute for the Study of War suggesting that Ukraine is making significant headway against Russian forces, causing notable losses and diminishing their strength at the front line, with Russia apparently forming new brigades in the Donbass and redoubling efforts to retake positions and considering the impending winter. How sustainable is this strategy of attrition? At some point, won't there be a breaking point? Further, considering the care and attention Ukrainian soldiers receive, juxtaposed with Russia's seemingly endless supply of replacements, how do these contrasting dynamics impact the overall capabilities of each force?
Like we've talked about before, war isn't just guns and strategy. It's about heart and, well, the nuts and bolts of moving things around, logistics. Russia, they can keep pulling folks from all over, giving them the numbers, so to speak, but just slapping a uniform on someone, giving them a rifle, that doesn't make them, combat ready. They might have a sea of faces, but how effective are these quickly trained troops? That's something to ponder. And thinking logistically with winter coming, I wouldn't want to be in the boots of a Russian grunt heading into that cold. The Ukrainians, they're quite aware that defeating mass, it's about long-range precision, right? It's about targeting the logistics, taking out the artillery. Because without logistics, which is like ammunition, food, fuel, and things to keep warm against the cold, the whole advantage of that mass diminishes significantly. So I feel the Ukrainians are sort of negating the main card that the Russians play. Now, there's this argument about changing the U.S. policy to, deploy U.S. military advisors right there on the Ukrainian ground rather than, having the Ukrainians leave their homes for training. Would I support it? Well, yes, but only if it aligns with my president's clear objectives for the war. Because you see history, the past 75 or 80 years, it kind of tells us we often step into conflicts bit by bit. First, it's equipment, then a few advisors, then Americans are in harm's way, and we're still scratching our heads asking, what's it all for? Americans, much like the Brits, will back something for a long time, but we need to, understand what it's all for. If we're not clear on the objective, then questions arise like, why are we spending, or why are our troops there? So the president, he needs to clarify, lay it out for the American people, the why behind our involvement. If that's clear, then our policies, they'll align with the strategic outcome we desire. As for military advisors, look, the Ukrainians, they certainly don't need lessons from us on how to confront the Russians. If anything, we should be, taking notes from them. Where we might offer value, though, is in helping streamline their logistics, their maintenance processes. They've got equipment from so many countries, which is good in a way, but also you can imagine the maintenance headaches, right? The varied parts, the differing systems. So offering expertise, helping them set up efficient logistics, training their crew on maintenance of advanced systems, that's where we could come in. They're quick learners, of course, but there's room for enhancement, especially considering things like the upcoming F-16s.
With the US pledging an additional $325 million in aid, why hasn't President Biden clearly defined the US strategic objective?
This is incredibly frustrating. I'm nearly at my wit's end. This is basic stuff, the stuff you'd learn on the very first day at Staff College. We need clarity on objectives, on the why behind our missions. And the White House, they're not ignorant, far from it. They're brilliant minds, dedicated to their roles. But there's this reluctance, hesitancy. First off, they seem deeply worried about potential Russian escalation. And while Crimea is under heavy duress, the Russians haven't, contrary to Elon Musk's remarks, resorted to nuclear options. So I feel like we're kind of holding ourselves back due to these overblown fears of a nuclear standoff with Russia. Secondly, there's this sense of uncertainty about what next, like if Ukraine emerges victorious, and if that leads to the collapse of Putin's regime, then what? There seems to be anxiety around this, which I personally think is misplaced energy. Fearing a Russian collapse isn't the way forward. Instead, we should plan, strategize for such a scenario. Recall when the Soviet Union fell? It wasn't chaotic. We didn't see nukes flying around. It's essential to put things in perspective. I genuinely believe that part of their reluctance might stem from concerns outside of Russia, specifically China. The Chinese, in some ways, might be sending subtle signals. They wouldn't want to witness a sudden collapse of the Russian regime, and that could be influencing some of the administration's actions. When I hear the administration say things like, "We're with Ukraine for the long haul," or "Our goal is to bolster Ukraine's negotiating position," it does raise eyebrows. It's concerning, because from where I stand, Putin might just be holding on, maybe even banking on a change in U.S. leadership, like a Trump return. And every time a prominent figure speaks of negotiation, it's like giving a lifeline or some sort of hope to the Kremlin. Diving deeper into the weapons topic.
General, I just wanted to get your reaction to the events recently of Poland saying it wants to stop supplying Ukraine.
Right, this move by Poland, it's a bit surprising to me. From my observation, I think Poland has been historically inclined to, support Ukraine, especially in these recent challenges. So when these statements emerged, it was a bit of a jolt. But understanding the political backdrop, it kind of makes sense in a way. Elections, they have this knack of influencing statements and decisions. The timing with the upcoming Polish elections, you can see the strategy there, right? It's not just a geopolitical move. There's an internal game at play, trying to appease their base voters, showing support to local farmers. It's a typical political play. But it's essential to remember that these short-term moves can have long-term implications. The hope is, after the dust of the election settles, we might see a shift or maybe a reevaluation of this stance.